on the road, about to reach Lethbridge, and I want to do this weird general review of podcasts, just as an avenue to talk about a couple things. And podcasts like saved my life, saved my sanity. We'll get into the specifics in a bit. Like I said, there's another weird... Some of my reviews are very like, oh, specific, let's talk about this movie, let's talk about this thing. I imagine albums will be in there in the future, books, things of that nature. But some of them are really general too, and this is one of those. So I just want to talk about podcasts as a whole, what they've done for me, how I feel like what's their usefulness, their function, maybe why, if you don't listen to any podcasts, you should check some out. So first off, some context as to how I got into podcasts. I don't actually remember. So I'm fairly sure that a good friend of mine, Alex, kind of introduced me to the concept, because I really don't remember how I got introduced, and I'm fairly sure he was listening just a little bit before me. I do remember that I had a certain app early on, and he was like, oh no, check out this app instead, Podcast Addict, it's way better. And it is way better, I still use it now. And this is like 4 years ago maybe that he introduced podcasts to me. Yeah, I wouldn't say about 4 years ago approximately. Anyway, so I don't remember all the details there. I do remember, however, that the first 3 podcasts I started listening to, I remember what those 3 were. I don't remember how I found them. I don't remember why I started with those versus other ones, and like, I don't remember any of that. But I remember Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast, Bad Christian, which is mostly from the band Emery, those dudes, and third one that I can't remember the name of right now because I actually stopped listening to it a while ago. But Brandon Chiappetti, who's the vocalist for Bleeding Through, he had this podcast that was, it's like half about metal and half about fitness, basically. Just depends what he felt like talking about that day. I don't remember the name of it anymore. But anyway, those are the first 3 I started with, and then slowly, you know, like I heard about one other one here, heard about another one there, and now I've got a little over 50 that I actively subscribe to and listen to. So how did we get from there to here, and why do I love them so much? So I enjoyed listening, you know, just casually here and there. The thing is, like, I do not listen to, like, everyone does, like, takes in media slightly differently. Some people can listen to music while they read a book, and I can't do that. With podcasts, I don't just sit there and listen. I don't just, like, you know, put a podcast on and hang out, listen to it. I need to always be doing multiple things, I feel, right? So it was something early on where, like, when I was playing video games, depending on the game sometimes, because there's no, like, heavy story or anything, I'd listen to some podcasts while I was playing a video game. When I was doing chores, cleaning my room, you know, dishes, whatever, started listening on drives a little bit, even just in the city of Saskatoon. And then the thing was that I was working at Maple Leaf, the Midwest Distribution Center. Probably save this for a story some other day, the real details of it, but let's just suffice for now to say it really sucked. It was not good. I was an order picker. Basically, my job consisted of, it was like being on autopilot all day for like over 8 hours a day on autopilot. It was cold, you're there early in the morning, and you're doing stuff, you're driving and you're getting boxes and you're putting them on a pallet, whatever. Like I said, I'll describe this in another, I want to have a conversation about my time at Maple Leaf anyway, or like a story time about it, I guess. But it was so boring, but it wasn't like, I don't know, if you work at like a place like an off sale, they expect you to bring a book or maybe watch TV or something. That's part of the job. That obviously is not the case with a job like this. So you're just going from location to location, picking up a box or 2 boxes or whatever, putting them on a pallet, going to the next one, the next one, the next one. So you're driving around looking at a screen that has numbers on it. You go to those numbers, you get more numbers on the thing. Like, it's just, that's all it is. It's very repetitive. You're on autopilot. You need a certain amount of focus, but it's kind of like 75% of your brain could just shut off and you'd be fine. So it's not very engaging, and I found that it allowed too much time to think. It was insane. Like, it was way too much time in my own head, because the stuff I was doing did not take up the mental processes to occupy me. That meant like 9 hours a day I was just floating around in my own head, just like exploring thoughts. It sounds cool, but like it's not. Like, it's just way too much time to do that, versus like it was just so imbalanced, because I mentioned in the vlog, or will be in the vlog, that I often don't give myself enough time to reflect and have quiet time and space to think. I distract myself so much, I keep very busy, and things like podcasts actually like help me distract myself from my reality and engaging in my own mind and just letting it wander the way that it should sometimes. But this is very imbalanced, where you got like, 8 to 9 hours a day that you're not really engaging with other humans. You're not occupied by the work, like mentally. So anyway, I listened to a couple podcasts before then, and then it slowly increased here and there. I got into more music podcasts, more humor, funny ones, like with comedians, more interview-based ones, awesome ones that are really educational, and just started exploring. And when I got to Maple Leaf, like, it took me, I don't remember how many months before I was like, you know what, I can't take it anymore. I need to start listening to podcasts at work, which is not allowed for a lot of reasons, safety reasons and good reasons. But I couldn't do it. I would have one headphone in, and like I said, I'll talk about more of this when I discuss in a story time, my time at Maple Leaf. But the thing was, I would make these playlists before I went, and so I wouldn't, like, I'd have headphones that just had like a button here so I could pause it and unpause it, and so I would never need to fiddle around with it at all while I was working. I would just, my phone would go in my pocket, like inside my clothes and all that, and just like, you would hang out there, and then cool. And this saved me so much. Like, beforehand I was listening to some podcasts, I was enjoying them, but this, I tried listening to music at work a couple times, and it was more distracting, and it also got boring eventually. Eventually it got boring. So podcasts, depending on the one I was listening to, I mean, sometimes it would tell me a story, or again, be educational, give me things to ponder that were in a very specific direction. Sometimes I'd be writing notes because I'd like think of something like creative that I could turn into a painting or what have you, or they were just funny and they were just distracting from the moment. They were just the perfect thing for that environment, where it was engaging enough and it also wasn't distracting enough, because it was going on in the background. It was passive listening, but it just like got me through the day every day. It was amazing. And that's when podcasts just blew up for me, and I was like, hey, and then I like kept adding more and hearing about more. The more podcasts you listen to, the more podcasts you hear about, because they'll have like, there's like networks, right? There's like a podcast network, and then they advertise other podcasts that are on their network, or they'll have guests that have their own podcasts, and then you start talking to other people who listen to podcasts every once in a while, and they have some good suggestions. Yeah, so it's just, yeah. So that's kind of the context of where we got from like listening to a couple. I don't even remember how I got introduced to them exactly. Had like 3 podcasts I listened to now there's like over 50 that I listen to on a regular basis. And Maple Leaf, working there, was the catalyst for just like ramping them all up. In saying that, I also had a lot of time there, like I said, like 8 hours at least like a day to listen, so I would get caught up on things pretty quick. For me, when I start a podcast, I generally go to the beginning. If they're interview based, then I don't listen to every single interview. I listen to the ones that I think are going to be interesting, with interesting guests. But if they're not interview based and they're something else, like let's say a TED radio hour is really educational and super cool and awesome. I start at the oldest one, and then I'm working my way up because I want to hear it all. So there's some podcasts that I'm like a couple of years behind on, and if they issue a podcast every week, then I've got 100 episodes to maybe catch up on. But it depends. Some of them I might skip. It just depends. Anyway, why do I think they're so great? What is this review portion going to look like? I think, like, again, it felt like it really saved my sanity while working at Maple Leaf, which is a whole other story of just like anxiety and not depression, but like not being in a good place and being in a funk. And podcasts really helped me get through the day. So I've got a soft spot because they really helped me out. Like, this medium just helped me so much. Couldn't believe it. It's just the perfect thing. And anyway, I just think that there's such a, I guess the first thing with podcasts, it's not a visual medium, so your attention, like right now I'm driving and I was listening to podcasts just like I would listen to music, and it's, you know, I guess it really speaks to the ADD or ADHD portion of me that exists, where I have some attention deficit. So I feel like I'm doing, like, listening to music can be very, very background for me, and a podcast is slightly more engaging and activates certain centers in my mind and gets me thinking about things, whereas music doesn't do that a lot of the time. Music for me is emotional and I feel it. And I talked about the power of music in a conversation a while ago, and there's yeah, you can look that up. But this is just so different. There's such a versatility to the material as well. But like I said, because the medium doesn't involve you to look at it, because I mean, there's plenty of things on YouTube you could look at, like TED Talks and things of that nature that are really educational, or you could, like, YouTube's just as versatile as podcasting is with the content, if not more so. I argue more so, because you can find anything you want there. It's comedy, it's stand-up, it's like this or that, or a storyteller, or educational things and science experiments, whatever. The list goes on. But with podcasts, I can get a lot of that stuff just auditory, so I don't need to visually focus on it. I can drive with it, I can have it on while I'm doing dishes, whatever. The medium just lends itself to that amazingly well. And again, the versatility of how much material there is. Anyone can start a podcast, just like YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, right? I could start a podcast. Well, we'll get to that in a bit. I could do that, and like, there's very little setup. It's very user friendly. It's like, oh, like YouTube, I've got a camera and I've got an internet connection, so I'm kind of set up and I can make some videos. And podcasting, it's like, well, all you really need is like your phone. Really, you could record yourself on there. You don't need fancy mics and mixers. You have internet access, you have a device to record, then you're kind of set. So I like the fact that that's a thing too, because the playing field is kind of like level in that way. It's not about who you know necessarily. I mean, I'm sure that happens with YouTube and stuff too. Like, it's who you know, they can like advertise your channel or there's things you can do, but you know, there's so many. This is leading into another conversation. It's oversaturated because the population of the world is oversaturated, so it is harder for like the cream to rise to the top. But it's kind of like, if you have something really good, people are going to tell other people about it, and then they'll be like, oh, that is really good, and they tell their friends about it, and then you've got a lot of people listening and whatever else. I like that. I like that anyone could do it. That if I have, there's some folks in Saskatoon, actually, I'll plug it right now. They have a podcast called The Terror Table. If you're into like horror and like horror movies and things of that nature, they watch horror movies, they talk about them, they review them, they do some other stuff all around that. So The Terror Table is something that an old acquaintance of mine, they've got a bunch of podcasts. You can just go and subscribe to it, and there it is, and it's free and whatever. That's the other thing, is the accessibility of podcasts, just like YouTube. Like, now they've got things like, there's premium channels on YouTube you can pay for, right? Well, now podcasts, we've hit a bubble, and it's starting to do that too, which kind of sucks, because some of my favorite podcasts are moving onto networks, and they're putting up a paywall, and now you can't access those podcasts for free anymore. You have to pay to subscribe to the network, much like you pay for Netflix or a streaming service. That's kind of what podcasts are getting into now, which is unfortunate, because one of the things I loved was that, like, they were all free. Like, almost all of them were just free, and now the majority of them are still free. But because like media giants and corporations and stuff, these companies recognize, like, hey, there's money to be made here through advertising, like that we could have them on a network, and now we can also make money by having someone just pay for that content. That content doesn't need to be free. People want it, they should pay for it. So like, I'm not gonna disagree with that, but the same thing, like, I subscribe to Netflix as a streaming service and that's it. I don't have anything else. Like, there's Hulu and there's like Amazon and whatever else I'm sticking with, and like there's Crave. I stick with just one and that's kind of it. And I miss out on some shows that I could stream, whatever, right? So with a podcast network, I'm like, man, if like one of them I know of, like Russell Brand is moving to this, I forget the name of it now. It's like Luminate or something like that. He's moving to that network, and they put up a paywall, and now you're gonna have to pay to access that network of shows. And he's on there, and that sucks. I find his podcast amazing. I actually looked at the list out of curiosity of all the other people on there. I don't know any of them, and I don't want to necessarily add more podcasts to what I listen to, because I listen to a lot, and so I'm not excited about that, and I probably will just stop listening to his podcast, and that really sucks, because it's really, really well done. So we'll see what happens in the future of that. Some podcasts that I was listening to, like Crime Town, they moved over to the streaming service that I don't use for music, that I can't remember the name of right now, Spotify. So now Spotify is carrying podcasts, and yeah, like one that I really like they're on Spotify. So if you don't have Spotify, you're not getting that podcast, and again, that sucks. So there's still a lot of free ones, but now we're in this transitional phase where I think there's been some realizations made as to how people can make money off this, besides the content creators themselves, but other people, by gathering a group of them and putting them behind a paywall or putting them on a network, and you can subscribe to it and pay a monthly fee. But that's another thing, the accessibility of them, the diversity of them, the ease or the medium that it lends itself just to an auditory thing. They're just really great. Like I said, you can find so many good things, and like your friends could have a podcast, you could have your own podcast. It's a fun thing to do, and listening, like I said, there's just so much you could listen to. I kind of listed a lot of the things that I listen to in genres anyway, and I didn't get into the specific podcasts that I really, really enjoy. I could talk about that sometime, but I mean, I'm making this a much longer video than I need to. But I mean, yeah, those are my big reasons as to why I think you should check podcasts out. It's just a medium that you can listen to podcasts in more scenarios than you can watch YouTube. Because every scenario, you could be watching YouTube, you could be listening to a podcast, plus you could be listening to a podcast in scenarios you can't be watching something like YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube channels that transition to podcasts, and then there's some podcasts that have a YouTube channel as well as an afterthought, and sometimes they just upload the podcast audio to YouTube. But for a couple minutes, maybe we'll talk about some of my favorites in their genres. Good. I'm actually going to look at my phone real quick here since I parked and see if there's anything else I want to pass on to you. Oh, there's so many. Like, man, there's so many. There's so many. I could just, I don't even know where to. I feel like I need to cut this now, and I probably will. You know what? I just listed a whole bunch of podcasts. What I'm going to do is break them down into smaller, I'm going to break down my podcasts and put them out as like reviews, and do it in sections. I just listed a whole bunch. I just talked for like 15, 20 minutes about a bunch of podcasts. You're not even going to get to see that. Cut that out, and I'm going to like be like, hey, you want true crime podcasts? These are the ones I listen to, and here's why, and I'm going to like review those in a way. I should definitely do that. I love talking about podcasts, but I just spent way too much time doing it just now, and that was really dumb, because that's not the direction this should go. Podcasts in general are great. You should get into them. I would love to hear about podcasts you listen to, things that maybe you think I should check out, things that I'll like, and I definitely will be giving you some suggestions too. So we'll see you on another time for another review.